Yeah, so it's a bit of a rush. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me to your wonderful, exciting, and now very cold city, huh? Okay, so these are two presentations actually. When Cosmin asked me to come here, I thought, okay, they go together, and especially the first one is very short. It's like 10 minutes, and it was made for a very specific context. Because I'm an Arab, I'm Lebanese, I'm always invited to speak about the Arab Spring. And actually, when Cosmin invited me for the Hong Kong Spring, I thought, oh my God, no, I have a spring in Hong Kong too, and the media is going to come, and like CNN and everything. So they're going to mess everything. So it turned out to be something different, but that's another story. So I'm always invited to speak about the Arab Spring to such an extent that at a certain point I would receive at least 2 emails per week asking me to go this place and that place and to speak about this, which was very problematic, right? So this was my contribution to a symposium. Actually, I didn't go through all of this explanation. I just went on stage and I just played this without saying anything. And just so you know, I asked them, because we're not going to do this here, but it made sense when I did it in Berlin. I asked them to give me my fee live in front of the audience. I mean, it will make sense at the end. So I like to contextualize this because now here it's a completely different setting, so it doesn't make sense to do it the same again. It doesn't make sense. I will play it now. It will take, as I said, 10 minutes. First, it starts with a video, which is this one. How do I make it full screen? Like this? Yes? No? This one? Okay. Thank you. Well, the sound thing should have gone in the other computer. This is one of the technical things that I've messed up. But it has no sound. It just has the ambient sound, so they were not saying anything. And this is actually something that happened in Syria. So that's the end of the first one. Okay. It will make sense, I hope, at the end why I showed this first, because when I show you when I start the second one, which is now, yeah, it is useful to have seen the first one in order to put a context on what I'm doing. So the second one is called, to move to this computer. Okay. Okay, so we were talking about the Arab Spring, and as I told you, I've been invited to a lot of places to talk about what's going on in the Arab world. Of course, it is a bit annoying because you become some sort of reference just because you have easy access. I live in Beirut, and there's not a lot of things happening in Beirut at the moment, or at least in the sense of security. So we can travel, and usually we are left alone. There is no regime oppressing us in the same way violently as in the other Arab countries. So you can travel, you are asked out, and you are asked to explain every time. The thing is, of course, this is the first part. The second part is that there was a lot of talk about something called the Arab Spring. So it was singled out. It was singled out. And all the media was talking about it in the sense that it was the Arab Spring. This is not wrong in itself, right? It could be like this, but at the same time, one could not help but noticing that during the same period, there were other movements as well throughout the world, like the Occupy movements everywhere in Wall Street and in many places in Europe and other places as well. And so, and I found that there was a lot of links between all of this, all of these things that were happening. And I was really surprised that this link was never made in the media. It was as if, something was happening there and something else completely different was happening in an essentially different part of the world. And the third aspect is the insistence on the role of Facebook and Twitter in these revolutions, which is not wrong in itself. Facebook and Twitter were a lot of help, especially in places where communication is targeted by oppressive regimes because they don't like people to communicate. So Facebook, Twitter, even what's it called, Skype, even though Skype is not very safe. But all of these electronic social media and electronic ways of communicating made it easier for people to communicate and especially to upload things so that everybody could become like the eyes of, his eyes became all our eyes. We could see what the people were seeing, sometimes live. But to claim that this is the Facebook revolution or the Twitter revolution, I think was a bit, I wouldn't say too much. I just wanted to know what it was, right? So what I did, Cosmin is distracting me. What I did is, before my Facebook turned into timeline, this is the older version. So what I did was, I went through all of my activity on Facebook from practically January 25th of this year, back 1 year, so to January 25th on 2010. And why January 25th? Because it was the date of the start of the Egyptian revolution. And the idea that I had was, okay, so I'm going to dive into this Facebook. I'm going to dive into it. And to see if all of the things, the traces that I left, do they add up? Do they make sense? Do they give me some sort of insight on what's going on all around me? And the model that I wanted to use was actually the Freudian model. So as with the psychoanalysis, the psychoanalyst asks you to start talking about your past, and you dive into your past. You start diving and diving and diving into your past until you reach the solution or the catharsis, the solution or the root of the problem that will cleanse you, that will heal you. And so I did, and I can tell you from now that on January 25th, 2010, I was posting about something completely different. I completely missed the Egyptian revolution. There was nothing. I didn't see anything. In fact, I found a software that records all my Facebook activity, that records actually everything that you do on screen. And I used it to make this video, which is sort of a 45-minute video. We're going to dive into the unconsciousness, the electronic unconsciousness of Facebook, to discover at the end that the point of making this video is that it's pointless. It doesn't have a point. I mean, it's a useless video. But I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to keep it running in the background as a distraction while I'm speaking. Does it make sense? Yes, thank you. So, okay. So at the end, I decided that there should be a better model to try and understand what's going on in the Arab world. And this is now, if this is a bit funny, maybe this is less funny, let's say. So I reverted to an old model that I know very well, which is the model of the Messianic times, the times of the coming of the Messiah. So I start like this. Okay, 100 profound solitudes constitute the city of Venice. That is its charm. 100 profound solitudes together constitute the city of Venice. That is its charm. A model for the man of the future. Something happened, and this is jumbled. This you cannot read, but it will be my starting point. So I will read this short text. The body in pieces has ceased to be a metaphor a long time ago. I don't know exactly when did this happen, and it doesn't matter. The body in pieces, the body everywhere, the body in perpetual motion, the body that can give meaning to the city in fragments by moving in and out of every fragment. I always thought of those words, as concepts or images, but never as an actuality. But then I saw demonstrators in Syria filming their own death. Always in short clips, always in urgent speech mode, interrupted by the sound of a few bullets, and then darkness. Sometimes we would see the movement of the image as the phone, used for filming, falls down to the floor. And, less frequently, the clip continues as the phone's camera is left on. There is nothing more immediate than that, there, where it happened. And there is nothing more remote, more mediated by so many technologies, here. Anywhere, here is being anywhere, the opposite of there. Most of all, there is nothing like a revolution to exacerbate all possibilities, to bring everything to its logical conclusion. For centuries now, we've been living within dualities that determined and shaped us and the spaces that we live in. Inner and outer, subjective and objective, thought and feeling, concept and form, materiality and image, private and public, domestic and political, and so on. And while Beirut is drowning into a sea of nothingness and perpetually negotiating with itself, in the cities of Syria, where people are filming their own death, never have these dualities been so sharply distinct and so intimately blurred, all at the same time. And the city of Homs, which was the butt of so many bad Lebanese jokes about the Syrians during the Syrian occupation, is now the heart of the revolution, still, even after it was destroyed lately. The last is now first, and we live in messianic times. And again, as I wrote in 2003, soyons désinvoltes, n'ayons l'air de rien. The only picture I'm going to show in this slideshow is this one. Especially when you're walking in Beirut, everything becomes an allegory. And I think the key to this one would be this, it's a collage, right? So the picture as it's in itself exists as it is, but I added this 17th century allegory about Venus and death. And this is a building which is being constructed. This is in the future. And for me, this is the past or maybe a possible future. And that's the only picture I'm going to show, a picture which is from Beirut, not from anywhere else in the Arab world or anywhere else in the world. The point of not showing picture is actually quite complex. First of all, I think that we are oversaturated with images that are coming out of the Arab world, you know, especially about the things that you can find on specific websites or videos that you can find on YouTube and so on. This is one. Secondly, since these are messianic times, this is the time of the cessation of happenings. So I just said that these are messianic times, and I'm going to prove it. And the messianic times are, by definition, times of cessation of happening. So everything stops. And because of that, the light, the pure light of God, fills everything. And in that sense, the light is so blinding that no pictures could be taken or could be seen. I will use a lot the theological model. I work a lot with theology to an extent that a lot of people ask me if I believe in God, if I don't believe in God. I believe that this is not important. It's not important whether I believe or not, but I can tell you that I don't have a lot of faith in anything supernatural. But I like the theological model precisely because it encapsulates there are so many hopes and even utopian moments of humanity which were written in these terms. So I think it is always beautiful to go back to this discourse to discover what humanity was thinking at a certain point. So all of this presentation is about capturing specific moments which I consider to be messianic moments. And the idea is this is a response in a way to a debate that is going on in Lebanon and in the Arab world at the moment about what is going on. Are these revolutions? Are these not revolutions? What is going on? Is this a Western conspiracy? Is the United States and Qatar and Saudi Arabia behind all of this? Or is it a genuine revolution that's going to change everything? So people give an argument, and then other people give an argument which goes in a different direction. And then if you are in Lebanon, you would certainly understand what I'm talking about. When you listen to talk shows, everybody loves to do these very complicated geopolitical analysis. So we are in Lebanon, which is a very tiny country, right? It's like, 4 million people? And we consider ourselves to be extremely important. We are really convinced of our importance and of the strategic importance of Lebanon. So all of these, commentators, they make all of these scenarios which are really complicated, using sometimes what looks like facts. But these scenarios become so complex that instead of helping people to or giving people an insight into what's going on or into a truth if it exists, they act like some sort of blizzard, like it's a haze. You don't see anything anymore because there are so many facts and analysis and all of that. So what I try to do, instead of making a complete analysis, a political analysis, because one, it's not my place, and secondly, it's not interesting. So I will try to pick up very specific moments and talk about these moments as being, messianic moments of messianic times, but without a Messiah. So there will not be, the Messiah will not come. There will not be, and if there is a redemption, the redemption is by the humans themselves. They are the ones who are going to redeem their past. I start with this. As I said, I'm not going to show pictures, but what I'm going to show are very brief descriptions in words, in a sentence or two, about what these pictures contain. This is actually a description of a video that you can find on YouTube. And in that video, there is a very specific man, a guy, who looks extremely shabby. So it's obvious that he did not have an education, that he's quite poor. And he was shouting to the top of his lungs that we don't want a religious state, we don't want a monarchy, we want a civil state. Which, for me, I mean, I think it's quite obvious that it is very much like the French Revolution slogan, ni Dieu ni maître, neither God nor master. This is exactly the same thing. And I'm sure that this guy doesn't know anything about the French Revolution. Possibly he doesn't know that France even exists. But I mean, it was so spontaneous that he was, you know, chanting the slogan like that. And the point of putting this is that because we always think of time as being a continuation, like a sort of a linear sequence, like one event follows the other, and then the past events are used to explain present events, you know, so they're all very logical and rational. But sometimes I believe that there are undercurrents in history, undercurrents, like under the ground. There are like tunnels connecting, these are metaphors, right? Tunnels connecting certain historical periods together. Like the French Revolution and what's going on in Egypt, you find a lot of connection, like this slogan, even though they are completely separated by time and geography. It's the same thing that what happened in France during the French Revolution, because in that time the French who were making the revolution were convinced that the French Republic is a restoration of the Roman Republic. So Rome was alive again in 1789, as in France, the French Revolution is alive again in Cairo and Tahrir Square in 2010. Hypatia is a philosopher from Alexandria, and she lived in the 5th century. She was a great philosopher, a scientist, and most probably a great Gnostic figure. She was killed by a Christian mob, dragged in the streets, and her body cut in pieces. Back then, Archbishop Cyril, one of the fathers of the church, gave the orders. And then, behold, the modern-day Hypatia in Cairo this time, Tahrir Square, and this time the orders were given by the leader of Egypt's military council, Tantawi. If you remember, there was a scene not so long ago when there was this girl who was actually wearing the traditional Muslim dress, the abaya, and the veil. And there was a demonstration, and she was dragged in the street, and her abaya was opened by the soldiers, and they were beating her so violently that one of the soldiers was actually jumping on her. And everybody noticed a very specific detail, that she was wearing a very bright blue bra, you know, for the bra, right? You say bra. So a very bright blue bra. And so they were, you know, they were talking about her and this blue bra. But for me, I mean, when I saw her, I saw Hypatia, because Hypatia was killed by a Christian mob. She was a Gnostic figure. Gnosticism, well, for those who don't know, Gnosticism was a heretic Christian sect of the 3rd and 4th century that was completely massacred by Orthodoxy. When Christianity was establishing itself, the Gnostics were the first to go. And they were amazing because they had this very complex universe, which is very different from how we understand God and the universe today. So for them, for instance, it was not God that is going to redeem people, but actually humans are going to redeem God, because God is in a state of forgetfulness of being. He expanded so much that he forgot what he was. So it was the human task to remind God of what he was. So they were very specific, very particular. So Archbishop Cyril gave the orders to kill Hypatia, and they killed her also. She was killed very violently. She was dragged in the streets, and her body was cut in pieces by the urns, because the pottery urns, they broke them, and with the pieces they cut her, you know, they cut her body, and she was killed like this. So in a way, Hypatia was like all history. You know, in Messianic times, all of human history is available, all of human history comes back. So Hypatia came alive again. And what I found interesting is that the soldier, the only soldier who covered her in Egypt, because there was one soldier, you can see it in the video, he is covering her. It turned out that this soldier was Christian, he was Coptic. So in a way, without him even knowing, he was sort of redeeming the past, redeeming that incident, the past of, you know, the first Christians of Alexandria and Cairo this time. So in Tahrir Square also, before Mubarak resigned, before he stepped down, every day, you know, the army was encircling the square. So the tanks and the army, military men were all around the square. And there was an old woman, she was very well known. She would carry a basket every day, and she would fill it with mango fruit, mangoes. And she would go to every soldier and give the soldiers a mango and tell every soldier, this is your brother, do not kill your brother. I thought that, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing because, of course, it's beautiful that this old woman is doing this, but also the thing that I spoke about these dualities between the public and the private. What this woman is doing is actually destroying the public space, but in a good way. Why? Because one of the main elements of the public space is that it has to be, people have to be anonymous. So in a public space, you are anonymous, you don't know who the other people are, you are anonymous, you are within a crowd, and etc. What this woman was doing was actually going against all that, because she was identifying every soldier by giving him personally, giving him a mango, and showing him a demonstrator, and telling him that this demonstrator is your brother, and that you should not kill him. So it became, she was establishing relations between people in spite of them. So there was no anonymity anymore. You cannot say that, oh, I just shot and one man died. It's not just one man, it's this person. This is also, in a way, this is very interesting in that sense, but it is also interesting about the enormous quantity of love. When I spoke of love in Berlin, some people started laughing, and then in the questions, well, thank you for not laughing then. In the questions, someone said, so what do you want? Are you saying that we, you know, peace and love, that we should all be hippies and everything? I said, no, of course not. I'm talking about a different kind of love. Actually, this love is, I mean, if you go to another register, which is also theology, but Islamic theology, like for instance, the whole story of Satan, and within Christianity, the Gnostics, of course, they loved Lucifer because Lucifer was the bringer of the light. But the Sufis, the Islamic mystics, they also they put a twist on the story with Satan, because according to the Quran, when God created everything, he created angels out of light, and he created the jinn, who are like very mystical creatures, out of fire. And then he created men out of clay, out of earth. So, and then when he created Adam, he asked all of the creatures that he created before, the angels and the jinns and everyone, to kneel down in front of Adam. Now, the official story goes that Satan, shaitan in Arabic, refused to kneel because he was too proud. He was so proud that he refused to kneel to, he was made of light, the other one was made of clay. But the mystics say, no, this is not true. Because what actually happened is that Satan told God that I love you so much, I cannot not look at you, even for a single fraction of a second. If I kneel down, I will not have you in my sight. For one fraction of a second, I cannot do it. And this is how, this is why Satan was punished. But he did it out of love for God. And it is this sort of love that I'm speaking of, this immense love of the mystics. This is what interests me, not peace and love. In order to explain a bit about that, Okay. I want to play a song for you. Yes. Where do I put it? Here? This is extremely unprofessional, but this is actually something from the religious repertoire of the Antiochian church in Lebanon, which is a very old church. It's well, I don't really need to go into this, but it's the Antiochian church has Orthodox and Syriac, so this is the Syriac part. We listen to it and then I tell you about it, right? Wait, Trevor.
كل ليل بهيج
Okay, so as I said, this is from the liturgy of the nativity of, so it's Christmas, even though Christmas is not that important in the Oriental churches, but I found this one. I thought it was beautiful because at a certain point she says it starts in Aramaic, which is the language of Christ, and then it continues in Arabic. And at a certain point she says that he is among us justice and kindness. Justice and kindness. Actually, it's not kindness per se, it's more something between kindness and tenderness. It's an Arabic word, hanan, which is quite difficult to translate. And it presupposes like not just tenderness, but tenderness and the act of going towards the other. So interrupting yourself and going towards the other, which is, I asked today the Cantonese equivalent, but I was not given a satisfactory. I was told it does not exist, which I think is impossible. It has to exist. I'm sure that you know it. But it's so it's all of this, all of these meanings together. So God is among us. This is what the song is saying, and this is the utopian moment in these songs and these hymns that were written hundreds of years ago. So God is among us, justice and kindness. And I thought this was amazing because this sort of dream of a just society and a society which is kind, a society which is tender, a society where people interrupt themselves to go towards the other, has always existed. And it's not just our imagination. It's not like the socialist heritage of the French 19th century. It's not about that. It's something which is much, much older. So, and this is what I saw in this woman who was interrupting herself by going towards all of these people, towards these soldiers and giving them mango fruits. Another example from Damascus this time. If you know Damascus, you would know that in Damascus there are a lot of ponds, small basins of water. There's a lot of them with fountains, like jet fountains, they go like that. And one of the signs of the protest, because Damascus is incredibly secured, so there's a lot of security police there all the time, a lot. So one of the signs of protest, which is very shy, but still, some certain activists, they would go to all the ponds at night, or to certain ponds, as much as they could, and they would color them. They would put red dye, so the ponds would become red. And the idea is like it became like blood. So all the ponds became like blood. This is the symbol for the blood that is being shed all over Syria. So what happened is that the security was so tight, they assigned a policeman to every one of those ponds so that they would guard it, so that people would not put dye in it. But still they found a way to put red dye in some ponds. So at the end they stopped everything. They stopped the ponds. The ponds now don't work anymore. The government stopped them. So instead of this, they went to the river, Barada, which crosses Damascus, and they dumped all of the red dye in the river. So the river became blood. The water of the river became like blood. And the river's water turning into blood, this is a scene coming out of St. John's Apocalypse. It's definitely a sign of Messianic times. What also happened, because there's a continuation of this story, not so long ago, maybe a month ago, there was, in Beirut also, we have a river. It's not a very big river, but it's a river nonetheless. And for some reason also it turned red. And what happened is that the government made an investigation and they said the river turned red because of a chemical spill or some sort of like industrial incident or something. It could be true. I don't know. But what happened is that some of the Syrian activists who are now hiding in Beirut proclaimed that this incident is their doing. So they said that not only in Damascus the rivers are turning into blood, but also in Beirut the rivers are turning into blood. So in a way it's sort of spreading everywhere, this sort of water turning into blood. This image from the Apocalypse. The People's Microphone, that is from Wall Street, from the movement Occupy Wall Street. And this is a description. Because they have not been granted a permit to use microphones or loudspeakers, the occupiers of Wall Street are using the people's mic, a technique in which short sentences are repeated in waves through the audience, sending the message further than the reach of one human voice. So they did not give them a permit to use microphones. So what they did, so if I was a speaker, I would stand in the middle of the crowd, and I would speak in short sentences, and then the people around me, the first circle, would repeat the sentences, and then the ones after them would also repeat it, so that, you know, it spreads in waves to all the crowd. Huh? So if this is not the Holy Spirit descending on the crowds and they all speaking in one voice, I don't know what would be. Huh? So this is also another sign of the coming of the Messianic times. As I said, again, this should be understood as a metaphor, not as the coming of Jesus. This also happened in Kaframbel in Syria, the village I told the story of before. You know, in the Islamic tradition, then when someone dies, before you bury him or her, you should wrap him in a cloth. And this cloth is usually made of vegetable products. So it's mostly cotton or linen, but never silk, because silk is animal product, so it's not used. So what they did, these people in the Kaframbel, they made this demonstration, like the silent demonstration that you saw before, but they were wearing their death shrouds. So they were in demonstration and wearing their death shroud, which is, of course, could be a sign that, you know, these are people that are saying that they're willing to die because they're not afraid, but it also can mean, it can be viewed as the dead coming back to life again. The dead coming back to life. So the dead rising from the graves and being alive again. And what is surprising also is that they used, I'm sure that in Occupy Wall Street they did not know this, but they used the same image to make a demonstration. But this time in New York it took on sort of a different turn, because it was more influenced by Hollywood. So everybody became zombies. So they made this sort of like zombie thing, and instead of looking for brains and blood, flesh, they were after dollars, so dollar bills. So it's the same image of the dead coming back to life, and which means the end of times and the beginning of Messianic times. This is something that is quite spectacular, actually. So it makes a lot of sense not to show it. Rabia Amroué is also working on this in his pixelated revolution. People are shooting their own death, and it's actually very vivid. When you see it on YouTube, you can find a lot of videos like that. People, they hold the camera, they're taking pictures in the camera, but then they see a sniper, or a sniper sees them, and you see in the camera, you see that the sniper has located them. So you see him, going, like raising the rifle towards them, but they don't move. And then the camera drops. You hear a shot and the camera drops to the ground because they're dead. Or maybe not. But, so it's in a way they are shooting their own death. And this is also a subversion, as the other one was, the old woman was subverting the relationship between the public and the private. These people are subverting the most sacrosanct relationship between life and death. The line separating life and death, which is something that cannot be touched, cannot be seen, cannot be determined. So they're subverting this, and they're also subverting what is supposed to be inside the body and outside the body, right? So the body is like our last sanctuary, and even that is broken. So all of these dualities which were brought forth by capitalism since the end of the Middle Ages, you know, the public and the private, and all of those dualities that I mentioned before. So all of these dualities are coming apart now. Of course, as I said, they're not coming apart in a systematic way. There is no theory. There's no one theory. Someone is taking that into, transforming this into a revolutionary theory, let's say. But these are moments which are very specific, and moments that you can see in Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Wall Street, in everywhere in the world. You can see moments like this, of these, what we thought was forever, what we thought was eternal, is being put into question. Not necessarily in a conscious way, but it is happening. Again, the same, this is a tweet, by the way, this is a tweet. You know, the protesters in Tahrir tomorrow will march to the US Embassy to protest the violent crackdown of Occupy Oakland. So the Egyptians, who were considered to be third world, you know, and these are, you know, those people, are protesting, demanding the rights of the democracy for the Americans. And they're not doing it as a joke, you know, like they did it in China when they did it in China, you know, after Tiananmen. So it's not a joke. It's something that they firmly believe in. It's something that they firmly believe in. And as you saw also in the picture of this man, who was definitely, you saw him, he's obviously the last man. This man was the zero. This man was the one who was never counted. And he's telling the people in the United States, don't be afraid, occupy Oakland. The last man. And this is why the last is becoming first, and we are living in messianic times. This is the first statement from the April 6 movement after the departure of Mubarak. The April 6 movement is mainly made out of young people who are Facebook activists and social media activists, and they came together and they did an amazing job, you know. So they had the statement: starting this day, this is your country. Don't throw garbage in the streets. Don't vandalize street signs. Don't pay bribes. Don't forge papers. Report anyone you see not doing their job. Don't verbally aggress girls in the street. Be kind to younger ones and respectful towards the elderly. Defend the oppressed. Stay positive and enough indifference and negativity. Work hard and sincerely at your job. If you know a bit of the history of the Arab world, you would realize how radically different this statement is from all the statements of the revolutions that we saw since the 1960s. This is so radically different. This is not about liberation of Palestine. This is not about the, I don't know what, the unity of the Arab world, or all of these slogans that turned out to be nightmares for all the people that believed in them. But this is about not throwing garbage in the street, not being rude to girls as they pass by, not being, you know, aggressive, sexually, verbally aggressive to girls as they pass by. This is what the revolution is about. I mean, it's so simple. It's so simple, and it's immense at the same time, because you start from the smallest possible element, and the smallest possible element, the fragment, contains the entirety of the human history. Are you sleeping, Cosmin? This is a statement from the local coordination committees, who, by the way, are doing a great job in Syria, because in Syria you have different factions. These are the ones that are the least recognized, because they are the most democratic. So I don't want to go into politics right now, but the local coordination committees are amazing. Their problem is that now all of their leadership is either killed or in jail, and nobody knows the exact amount of prisoners in Syria, political prisoners. Some people say it's up to 50,000 people who are detained in jails since the start of the revolution in Syria. So, and mainly they capture these guys because they're the easiest one. They're the ones who organize the demonstration, and all of these things that you see on YouTube and everything, this is organized by them. So the role of the Constitution is to build the political, legal, and institutional barriers that would stand against despotism and not to ensure an unlimited power to the ruler, and that all Syrians are equal politically and they can form the organizations and political parties that they see necessary to make their voices heard in the public sphere. I don't want to go too much into this, but the thing is, what I found amazing is that, you know, Syria is one of the worst dictatorships in the region. Seriously, I mean, much worse than Iraq, much worse than Libya. Syria, nobody knows what Syria is because, I mean, the amount of blackout is just staggering. At the same time, the difference between Iraq, for instance, and Saddam Hussein and Hafez al-Assad or Bashar al-Assad is that they always maintained a level of sanity and respectability, the Syrian dictators. While, you know, Saddam Hussein was completely crazy, and Gaddafi had, you know, like almost epileptic episodes, like explaining democracy. He said he goes into Arabic, so democracy sounds like something in Arabic. It sounds like to make the chairs last longer. So he said this is its meaning, and its meaning is that the ruler sits on the chair and he doesn't go away. This is how he explained democracy. I mean, this is absurd, and he did this on you know, Italian television. So the Syrian leader would never do this. I mean, they are respectable. This is why, you know, they keep quiet, a low profile, but it's a brutal dictatorship. And to have people like this, to have this high level of consciousness, political consciousness, and to speak of these are terms that could have easily come out of the French Constitution, again, one more time, I think is amazing. Banner held by demonstrators in Kaframbil: we will not accept despotism even if it was from our own coordination committee. Banner held by a young demonstrator in Tahrir Square: may the next president fall. And I think this sums up everything about the revolution. It's not about this president or that person. It's about the possibility of change. We have been living in the Arab world for 50 years now. It's as if time was cast in stone. Nothing could be changed. Nothing. It's like the things are like this. This is God's will, and this is it. And now there is a possibility. Because, of course, now people are talking a lot about the Islamists, and that these revolutions are being taken over by the Islamists, and that, you know, all of that, which is true, in a way. The Islamists constitute the counter-revolution they did in Cairo, in Egypt, and they are taking the power, and they're trying to take power in Tunis as well. But the point is, now there is a possibility of change, and now people in Tunis are fighting back. And this is how society is formed, by these fights, because they're fighting for their rights. And of course, the first people who are going to pay the price, because there is a price to be paid, this is just the beginning of everything, are women. And even now, very ugly men are debating, you know, like what we are going to do with the body of women throughout the Arab world. Should she wear like this? Should she go out? Should she do this or that? Who are you to decide? Why are you deciding about her body? But it's like that. Women and religious minorities are going to pay a price, but anything is better than to be perpetually cast in stone. And this is what this young demonstrator in Tahrir Square understood very well. This was even before Mubarak left, may the next president fall. Because of the situation that I mentioned in Damascus, it is very difficult for people to have sit-ins in public places. So you can find a lot of videos on YouTube of people, especially women, doing sit-ins inside their own homes. So the home, which is a completely private space, is broadcasted on YouTube, and it becomes the place, the locus of the policy, of the politics. So the politics are not anymore in the public space; they are now in the most intimate of places, which is the home. And this is, in a way, the old feminist slogan that the domestic is political. I mean, this is the concretization of it, and I'm sure that they haven't read second, first, third generation feminists in these. But in revolution or in messianic moments, this is what happens. All of human history becomes quotable, becomes available, even if you haven't had a prior knowledge of it. It becomes history, it becomes available to you. This is taken from the Gospel of Thomas, which is a Gnostic Bible, a heretic Bible. I hope it makes sense now. There's a Ali al-Mahdi, I think you remember her. She was this young Egyptian girl who is 20 something, early 20s, and she took pictures of herself absolutely naked, frontal nudity, and she posted them on her blog on the internet. Of course, that created a scandal. People didn't want, people started, debating, how could she do this? This is bad for the revolution, this is good for the revolution. The point is, what I found fantastic in this can only be explained by the reaction that went on not in the Arab world but in Israel, in Tel Aviv, because the Israelis always have this tendency to tell people to tell the Arabs when they see Arabs abroad, especially, oh, we love you, we love you, we love you. Why don't you love us? So, well, maybe it's too stretched. Maybe I should explain more. It's okay. In any case, so when the pictures of Ali al-Mahdi came out, there was some sort of similar thing done in Tel Aviv from Israeli women, but it's not similar. I mean, it's similar, but it's not similar at the same time, because what they did was a group of women were naked, but they were not actually naked. I mean, they were naked, but they had a big banner that was hiding all of their private parts. And they were turning, they were tilted, or they put their hair on their breasts so that the breasts do not show. So you could not see their breasts or their genital region. And the banner said, from Tel Aviv to Cairo with love. So this is definitely not the kind of love I was speaking about earlier. Because the problem with Israel is about occupation, it's not about love. I mean, and the occupation, then we can talk. If there is occupation, there's no place for love, for talking, for anything. It's a different story. But the thing here is that they missed the point, because the act of Ali al-Mahdi is not an act of love. It's actually an act of destruction, which is very important. Because before, well, Christ in his second coming, or in his first coming if you're Jewish, will not only come as a redeemer of humanity, he will come also as a subduer of the Antichrist. So there is a big battle going on, or will go on. So before he could redeem humanity, the Antichrist has to be conquered. And in that sense, there will be a lot of violence. But not violence in the sense of physical violence, violence in the sense like what Ali al-Mahdi did. It's a direct attack against the values of patriarchal society. And this is what drove people crazy. Because she was not shying away from it. It was frontal nudity, in your face. I'm like this. Not hiding behind a banner, not doing her hair like this, not trying to look feminine, just the body of a woman, naked. Wael Ghunaim is a controversial figure now. I don't want to go into all of this talk about Wa'al Ghunaim? Should he work in politics? Should he not work in politics? All of that. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that this idea of turning, turning man into male into female and female into male, and of breaking the boundaries. Of course, I don't know if you know. I mean, Chinese society is probably very different from our own society, where the roles of man, the social roles of men and women, are quite very distinctly assigned. So a man does 1, 2, 3, and a woman does a different 1, 2, 3, and there is no possibility of encountering. So it's a very, the machismo is very expensive. The societies are very macho. And this guy was Wa'al Ghunaim. He was, the Google operator in Cairo, and he did stuff, and it doesn't matter what he did now. But he was imprisoned during the first days of the revolution. He was put in jail. So, and then he didn't know what went on. So he was in jail, and he didn't know what was going on. And directly after he was released, he was taken to have an interview on television. Directly from prison, he just passed by home to say hello to his mother, and they took him directly to television. So he was not in the know. And then the speaker started asking him questions, and then she started telling him about his friends or people that were killed during these demonstrations in Cairo. And when he saw these people, he started, he's the hero of the revolution. He's like the leader, or was. He started crying on television, which is something that a man would never do. A man would never cry, because women cry, men do not cry. So this man was transforming himself into a woman, so to speak. No, he was crossing the boundary from what is male to what is female. And when I saw this, I thought, my God, we are so far now from Abdel Nasser. If you know Nasser from the 1960s, the military guy, very powerful, manly man, that, always triumphant, always never defeated. Even when he loses the war, it's not his fault. It's someone else's fault. We were expecting them from the south, from the east, they came from the south. Hey, what do you want? That's his reason. This is why we lost the 1967 war, according to Nasser. So in 40 years, values have changed. Of course, that does not mean that these values are completely gone now, but something has changed. There is something. Something is going on. And what I try to do, because this is my the last thing that I speak of, what I try to do is to identify these moments. And there will be, this is something that I'm working on, so it's going to take a while to finish, if it is ever finished. But the point is to say that there is something going on, whether in the streets of Cairo, or in the streets of Damascus, or in the streets of London, or in the streets of New York, or wherever. Or maybe in Hong Kong, I don't know. I know very little of Hong Kong. But my point is that what we used to take for granted for so long is not to be taken for granted anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, very much for this amazing presentation. We are going to take questions now both for Tony and for Natasha. And we will keep it shorter because it is extremely cold here, so it is not possible to stay much longer. Are there...
In both presentations, there's kind of this aversion to spectacle that's very obvious. Tony, in this resistance to actually showing these images that could become very spectacular, and Natasha, in terms of a lot of the work that you're working with, being much more archival, historically oriented. not a lot of very kind of visual, sexy contemporary art there. So I'm curious if what makes the territory of art still interesting to work with, if there is such a resistance to spectacle and visual pleasure, and where is the balance there, and why do we still choose to work in art given the scenario?
Yes, for both of us. You want to start? You want to say something? Maybe you need a microphone, Natasha.
Yeah, I'm not sure this was necessarily the message I wanted to convey with this, and I actually want to say I'm sorry about the conditions of some of how the conditions the works were shown. I mean the videos themselves. Yeah, but I mean the kind of element of spectacle in art was really not. It's really not something that necessarily interests me or is present really in our curatorial practice. But I think that visual pleasure is not necessarily related to spectacle. So I would not call this work visually lacking visual pleasure. So in that element, I'm not sure I can agree with your comment. But what is interesting for us in terms of, no, I think I answered actually. So spectacle is maybe something I'm really not interested in, and visual pleasure is something we are happy when it happens. Yeah. Would you like to say something?
I have this. Yes. Visual pleasure, or art being the place where visual pleasure is. This is also there's a lot of writing about that, especially from the point of view of feminism, in the sense that whose pleasure is it? But I'm going to skip this and take it to another repertoire, which is in keeping with what I was trying to talk about earlier about these dualities. You know that also we have learned to separate form and concepts so well, like words convey concepts and thoughts, and images convey convey forms and beauty and ultimately visual pleasure. And even if you push it even more, that would be the spectacle, the spectacular, in a sense. But at the same time, if you look at a register, which is not that old, but still just prior to the Renaissance, the icons, especially the Orthodox icons that I know, especially from our part of the world, but also what you can call icons in the medieval drawings, and how do you say when they decorate a book? It has a specific word. I don't know it in English. Illuminations. Okay, thank you. No, but I'm talking about like these icons and those as well. So in the icons, especially the ones that I know from the Oriental Orthodox tradition, first of all, the icon is not, in Arabic you refer to it as being written, not drawn. So you say you write an icon. So the icon is like a text to begin with. There are images, but they function as texts. And the same hand that draws the figure is the hand that writes the texts on the icons. And if an icon that does not contain a text is not considered to be an icon. So it has to have like some sort of writing, even if it's like really small, just like the name of the saint or the name of the scene, or let's say Theotokos, or the Mother of God. So they write just Theotokos. Very simple. What I'm trying to tell you is that there was no separation between the text, because I was showing texts, and the image. So both operated in the same way. They both operated on the same level, on the same plane. But we have, since the Renaissance, we have accepted the fact that no, they are separate. And even till now, when I show texts instead of images, I get questions like this, and or similar to this, which is, of course, it's not a criticism. I'm just telling you what I have, huh? what I get when I work on this idea of, instead of showing images, I show text or words that describe the image, or things like this. So this is the first part. This is the first part of my answer. It's not a direct answer, but still. It is direct in the sense that the visual pleasure is not only based on the image, it can also be found in text. If you think that every word, the meaning of the word resembles its shape. And that's not, I think in Chinese and in Cantonese and Mandarin it's like this, in Japanese and all of it, but also in Latin languages and in Arabic and in Hebrew. All words resemble, they look and they sound like what they mean. So in that sense, you can start getting pleasure out of that. That's definite. In the other sense, another way of answering this, if these people are destroying these dualities, so why don't I do the same thing? Why don't I also take a step into putting away the image and putting in front the text? That would be my answer. I don't know if it's a good answer, but it's my answer.
Yeah, I had a question actually about Blanqui and Louis-Auguste Blanqui in relationship to your presentation, and where you're really interested in these kind of upsetting reversals, roles not being able to play their roles anymore and flipping and turning inside out, and that and like the figure of the revolution as a thing which does this. And I wonder, I couldn't help but think about Blanqui for your entire presentation, and the revolutionary who in his jail cell commits himself to an understanding of the universe as an endless repetition of the same, an eternal repetition of the same. So I wanted to know if at all, because there's something really optimistic in your presentation, and I wanted to know how it is that you can grapple with the problem of repetition.
Well, the reference is definitely there, and I think that, like me, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, but like me, your reference to Blanqui comes from Benjamin, from Walter Benjamin. Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah. Definitely, the Benjamin is very much present. I don't like to, usually I don't like to name names because it sounds pedantic a bit. In the Q&A, I don't mind, but during the presentation, a lot of references would like turn against the presentation itself. It becomes heavy. So I try to avoid naming, which is in keeping also the idea of, the Benjaminian idea of quoting. So you can quote whoever, doesn't matter. So that's the first part, and yes, so definitely Blanqui, Benjamin are there as a reference in the background. Now the idea of repetition is a question worthy of answering, because also they're both worthy. No, I said it wrong. I mean, it's like I'm very interested in answering that other part of the question as well, because there's a lot of debate in the Arab world now about this specific idea of repetition, and the example is usually the Iranian Revolution, because during the Iranian Revolution, all of the left wing, the seculars, the Democrats, the liberals, they all supported the mullahs, the ayatollahs, at the beginning. Khomeini came later, but they all supported them. They supported the Islamic nature of the revolution because they said, yeah, we can talk with them, we can have reach some sort of compromise, it's good to have a dialogue, We'll see how it leads, where it leads. And yes, it led to a catastrophe. I mean, they were all either imprisoned or executed. So in that sense, the repetition, the eternal repetition, would make one extremely cautious of what's going on now in the Arab world. But I think that there is something, I don't think you can call what I did optimistic. I'm completely disillusioned about everything. But at the same time, I know that there is no other way. You see, so it's like you're doing something, and you know you have no illusions about its possibilities or in the future. I know that there's nothing in the future, or maybe not in my lifetime, that will come out of this. So I don't have these illusions. But what I do have is an obligation to the zeitgeist, to the spirit of the time. It's sort of like the zeitgeist is like forces things on you. This is the way things are. This is the road that is going. So we walk this road, disillusioned or not, repetition or not. You walk this road. This is the first answer. The second answer is that there are globally it might look the same. Globally it might look the same. Like, okay, so the fundamental Islamist Shiite in Iran took the power in 1978, 1977, 1979. Now in Tunis and in Egypt, the Islamic Brotherhood is winning. So these are the fundamental, or the Salafis, these are the fundamental Muslims winning again. So they're going to, like kill the revolution. But what you're seeing is something which is very different. Like if you look into details, if you're living there, if you're living, where I'm living, you see that in details, it's very much different. I was telling Natasha this morning, we were having coffee, and I was telling her about this Salafi guy. So there is this, the grandson of Omar al-Sharif. Omar al-Sharif is a very famous Egyptian actor from Lebanese origins, but he's Egyptian. So he has a grandson, and the grandson recently wrote in the paper an article saying that he's saying that he is gay and that his mother is Jewish. And he's wondering if he has a place in the new Egypt. And the response came not from someone in Egypt, or at least I didn't know what they said. I don't know what they said in Egypt, but someone in Lebanon, a Salafi sheikh. Like these are supposed to be the most fundamental and, the ones completely against a person who is gay and who has a Jewish mother. He said that if Egypt does not have a place for people like him, then it's not Egypt anymore. Go figure. I mean, I'm not saying that in defense of the Salafis. The Salafis are horrible. But it's just like things are not as clear-cut as they seem to be. And, yeah. It's good to, purity on all sides is not good. Like, I'm pure, and this is me, and this is what I believe, I don't want to see you. That's not good. And the most important thing, if we can establish everywhere in the Arab world, including Lebanon, which is supposed to be democratic, Lebanon, but if we can establish a system of passation of power, I don't know if you say that in English, but like power changes. So through elections or, like democratic means, if you can establish that and if you don't end up with rigged elections or with elections that are eternally postponed or with elections that are rigged from the start through the electoral law, then fine. Let them take the power now. That will demystify them. And people would see them for what they are, and then they will lose. Because in Iran it was different. It was a revolution, revolutionary councils, I don't know what, the Soviet model. Now it's not that. Yeah, was there a question there? No?
I had one. If we're cold, though, we can just wrap up. I didn't mean to. I guess my question is maybe kind of a mirror of the one about practical, which kind of asks either why this is art or why this has to be art, or and I guess that my question is at one point you kind of recuse yourself from talking about because you said it wasn't your place, but then most of the rest of the work that we've looked at has been kind of heavily political, not just in its kind of content, but in the way it works. And so I was kind of wondering why not. Become involved at that point as well, but to kind of link it with the practices which we on the first presentation. There's this kind of an old modernist kind of a trope of the kind of the right wing project of aestheticizing politics, which is in opposition to the left wing project of politicizing aesthetics, and this being the kind of like the war in modernism, which I just made up. But then it seems like in all of this, there's a kind of a sense that now this kind of these expanded conceptions of art practice are the site at which we can engage in a certain kind of politics most effectively, or in the right way, or with the proper level of kind of nuance and complexity, in ways that it's no longer as possible to do in kind of the other kinds of spaces which can also be kind of thought of as politics. And so I guess my question isn't how this is art, but how this is the way to do politics now, and what are the potentials, and how do we end up as artists involved in this?
When I mentioned the geopolitical analysis and the profusion of geopolitical analysis, I was talking about a very specific kind of analysis that is always linking everything together. So they say, for instance, this decision in Syria is, you see that especially on television, news, how do you say, debate shows, the political debate shows. So Syria, the ambassador of Russia went to Syria, and they talked to the president, who talked to Iran, and Iran took this, and this is, the strategic interest of Iran is for this to happen, but the Americans want to do this, and so there's this whole world construction of the universe about, like some sort of paranoia. It's like you start from a very paranoid idea that there is a conspiracy, and then you construct all of the world around it. about your theses of the conspiracy. Now, the conspiracy could be American, could be Iranian, could be anywhere, depending on your position. But it's always this sort of like construction of the world as you know, the world of politics as we know it on the news. And to be able to do that, they use a lot of factual knowledge. So as they're speaking, they give you so many facts that happened actually in politics. Like, it's true that yesterday this guy met this guy and that guy met that guy, and it's true that, you know, this one did this, but they link them together, they put them together in such a way that it becomes completely absurd. Of course, if you are following these debates, you don't notice this. You say, well, he's right. What he's saying is right. So in a way, it distorts the world instead of giving you the truth of the world. It completely distorts the world. In what sense is this work political? The politics of this work or any other work that, you know, I might defend or I might like is precisely not in that. I mean, it's radically different from this because it tries not to give you information, not to give images, not to give anything. So it's sort of like it restrains from giving a lot of things. In a sense, it resembles, or it tries to resemble Lucifer again in the Gnostic thinking, because the Gnostics say that Lucifer is his name is the holder of the light. So Lucifer is the holder of the black light. The black light, because he liberates you by taking from you, not by giving you. He doesn't give you. He liberates you by taking from you. He takes from you your illusions about this world, because for them this world is all an illusion, all of this world. It was created by this false god to keep you from knowing the true God. And so this Lucifer guy comes and he liberates you by taking away all of these images, which is a figure which is very, resembles a lot the main figure in Thomas l'Obscur, in Thomas the Obscure, what's his name, in the 1930s, a surrealist writer, friend of Bataille, Blanchot, Maurice Blanchot, thank you very much. I'm getting to that age, I'm forgetting. So Maurice Blanchot wrote this beautiful story about this guy who goes into this cave and it's pitch black, nothing. There's the absence of light. And this is what, I mean, if I want to do anything, I want to do this. The complete absence of light, the complete absence of facts, but not to fall into a sentimental subjectivity, because I'm not interested in that. I like, I don't like, I love, I don't love. Yeah, I'm not interested in this. I'm interested in this sort of destruction of the reference of the factual. The facts are speaking, so you should shut up. No, I don't have facts and I will speak. And it will make more sense than anything you've heard, I hope. This is what I'm aiming for. Maybe I failed, but I hope. It will make more sense than any, you know, political analysis you have heard on television. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't work. That's another story, but this is what I try to do. I think I've answered both your questions.